Have you and I miscommunicated the gospel? Have you and I misinterpreted the gospel, the message of the gospel? The comedian Michael Lurick wrote a short article titled "The 5 Most Construed Text Messages by People in a Relationship." Here are some of the responses. So if you're new in a relationship, have you ever seen the response, okay, lowercase, in a text message? So you send someone a text, you say, hey, would you like to go out Friday night? They send back, okay. What is the intended meaning of that? What is the intended meaning of okay? Well, he says the intended meaning of okay is the last thing you said is completely fine, and I'm okay with that. But what is the miscommunicated meaning of that? It's, that's fine. We'll do what you want today, right? That's what okay can sometimes sound like. How about this one? Have you ever received the response in a text message, hold on? What does that mean? When somebody sends you a message and they say, hold on. Well, the intended meaning is, hey, what you're saying is very important, but just take a second and I'll respond to this in just a minute when I have time. But what is the misinterpreted meaning of hold on? What is it? Yeah, it's okay. I really know, but just give me 1 second. Really, come on. I'm not ready to answer this right now. Okay. What about when somebody responds to a text message and they say okay, capital letters? What does that mean? What's the intended meaning is, okay, I don't have a minute right now, but I saw your text and I'll respond to it as soon as I can. Okay. But what is the received message of okay, capital letters? He says it's this. It's okay. I got it. You just don't stop, do you? You are the most annoying person in the world. Okay, I got it. That's sometimes how it's taken. What about the expression "I don't care"? Right? When you receive that message, said someone a question, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And they say, "I don't care." Well, the intended message is, I really don't have an opinion on this message. It could go this way. It could go that way. I don't care. But what is what we receive when we hear that? Someone says, "I don't care." Well, the expression, the misinterpreted meaning is, whatever you say, I don't care anymore. I hate you, and this relationship is boring. And every time I see you, I feel sad. Right? That's what we receive. It's a misinterpreted meaning. Or how about, and finally, the unanswered text, right? To me, that's one of the hardest to receive. It's like, what are they actually saying there? Its intended meaning is, you know what? I mean, right now, I just can't text you back. I would when I grab my phone, but as soon as I can, I will respond to you. But then, when you receive an unanswered text, what is the misinterpreted meaning? Is that how could you not be, speaking to me right now? Are you, the only 3 times that you wouldn't ever use your phone is in the bathroom, sleeping, or if you're dead, right? So it has to be one of those. And so you get concerned if somebody doesn't answer your text. And so as we begin to think about this, there's a lot of miscommunication in our world today, misinterpretation, is there not? And I bring these illustrations just to remind us that it's easy to miscommunicate, and it's easy to misinterpret in our quite technological age. It is. But back to our first question, how do you think the Apostle Paul would answer that? The question, have I or have we misinterpreted the gospel? I think Paul would say absolutely not. In Galatians 1:11 through 12, verses 1:11 through 24 is Paul's answer to that question. Have you misinterpreted, miscommunicated the gospel? Paul says, absolutely not. If you're joining us today for the first time, or you haven't been here in the last few weeks, currently we're in a series in the book of Galatians. And our theme for this particular series in this season where we're at is this, is that the gospel plus nothing is everything. But the gospel plus something is nothing. So what's the problem that Paul is addressing at the church of Galatians? The problem is that the church of Galatians, yes, they once received good teaching from the Apostle Paul. They began to wander a little bit from the teaching of the gospel originally. And so maybe this could be some Judaizers that that are saying, well, you need the gospel plus the Torah, the law, and you need the gospel plus Jewish customs. Or it could be on the Gentile side, like we demonstrated a few weeks ago. These could be way out in left field Gentiles that are saying, no, it's all about grace. You don't need any of this stuff, and you could do whatever you want. And so Paul's hearing all this, and he's coming back to the church of Galatians, and he's writing to them, and he says, no, we need to get this straight. And so chapter 1 is about two things. Two things about chapter 1 is that Paul's apostleship, and the second is the gospel. And today we're going to be touching on the second, Paul's gospel. So as we listen to Paul and his word today, let's be reminded that we can equip ourselves to understand the truthfulness of the gospel and challenge ourselves to communicate it effectively every time. Every time. So turn with me again to Galatians 1, verses 11. Preached by me, this is Paul, the gospel preached by me is not based on human thought, for I did not receive it from a human source, and I was not taught it, but it came by a revelation from Jesus Christ. So Paul's first notion, this section is Paul's argues his source of the gospel. So what is the source of Paul's gospel? It's Jesus Christ. That's the source. But Paul's first statement is that the gospel is not based on human thought in verse 11. The gospel is not based on human thought, or it's not down from man. The gospel is not from man. To illustrate this, I'd like to pull out David Hines. If David Hines was to bring me my Hebrew quiz, right? So he was the one bringing it, and he gives it to me, and I say, and as he's leaving, I say, David, wait, David. This quiz, it says I got a C+. Oh man, David, did you give me that C+? And David's going to say, no, I didn't give you that C+. It came from Dr. Petter, right? And it came from Dr. Petter. And then he might smirk and say, if it were me, I would have given you an A+. Well, thanks, David. But in reality, it's not it's not that David brought me the quiz that gives the value of the quiz, but it's who the quiz is from. That it's from a higher person, Dr. Petter, who gave me the grade of the quiz. And that kind of demonstrates what Paul is doing here. Paul is saying that it's not the person who gave it. It's not that it came from man, but it's from the source. And it's not down from man, but the gospel is from God. Paul goes on to say two more things. He says in verse 12, I did not receive it from a human source, nor was I taught it. So Paul is saying, he's saying that the gospel is not from man, it's not received by man, and it's not taught by man. So Paul's argument, he's making 3 points. That the gospel is not distributed by man, it's not received or delivered by man, and it's not taught or instructed by man. But where's the gospel that Paul says, where does it come from? Where does he say? Verse 12. Yeah, the gospel comes from the revelation of Jesus Christ. Exactly. This is the second puzzle piece of Paul's argument in Galatians 1. And I already gave you a sense of the first puzzle piece. So Paul says the gospel is not from man, it's not by man, it's not received by man, it's not taught by man, but it comes from Jesus Christ. Where have we heard this argument before? What verse did Paul already do this same thing? Scroll through Galatians 1. Where's this come up at? Any takers? The gospel is not from man. How about verse 1? Turn your eyes to verse 1. Paul says, Paul, an apostle, not from who? Not from man, right? Not by who? Man, but by Jesus Christ. Here are two pieces of Paul's puzzle that he's putting together in the book of Galatians. Is verse 1 and verse 11 and verses 11 and 12. His thesis is that he's an apostle, not from man, not by man, but by the means or through Jesus Christ. And now Paul's going to say in verses 11 and 12, he's going to say the gospel message that I preached is not from man. It's not received by man, and it's not taught by man, but it comes through the revelation of Jesus Christ. This could be Jesus Christ revealing himself, or it could be God the Father revealing Christ in and to Paul. But regardless, it's the revelation. It's Jesus Christ who was revealed to Paul. Verses 13 through 14, and actually verses 13 through chapter 2, verse 14, are really the supporting arguments for verses 11 and 12. So Paul's making his thesis in verses 11 and 12. The gospel is not from here, but it's from Jesus Christ. And then he goes on to give his testimony about but his experience with the gospel and how it's transformed him, and that in every way the gospel is from God, that God is the source. So if you remember anything today, remember verses 11 and 12. I thought of the Charlie Brown cartoon. There used to be the teacher. Whenever the teacher spoke, what would she say? Wah, 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 wah. And so for this today, it's kind of like, if you remember anything that I say, wah, 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 11 and 12. Wah, 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 wah. Remember those two verses. Allow that to just kind of meditate in your mind as we continue. So verses 13 through 14. Paul says, "For you have heard about my former way of life in Judaism. I persecuted God's church to an extreme degree, and I tried to destroy it. I was advancing in Judaism because beyond my contemporaries among my people, because I was extremely zealous for the tradition of my ancestors." The first thing Paul says is, I persecuted the church. And he modifies that. He says, to an extreme degree. The second thing Paul says, I tried to destroy it. And finally he says, I was advancing in Judaism beyond my contemporaries. These things were the basis. They were all based on one thing to me. And that is Paul's zeal for the traditions of his ancestors. Now, when we think about zeal in the Bible, is zeal a good thing? Yeah, I think it is, because on the basis of two or three examples, one is that God is described as a zealous God, right? In Deuteronomy 4, verses 24, God is zealous and jealous. But also, Phinehas, who is the son of Aaron, is also described to act zealously for God in separating God's people from the people that weren't of God. And so when we think about Paul being zealous, I think that's a good thing. But we have to stop and say, what was the object of Paul's zeal? What does the text say? What is the object of Paul's zeal in verse 14? I was extremely zealous for the traditions of my ancestors, or the traditions of my father. So is Paul being wrong for being zealous? No. But it's what he's being zealous for and how that zeal comes about. So he's zealous for the traditions of his father. One passage that I think speaks to why tradition is held at such a balance is Matthew chapter 15. And you could turn there if you want, but the gist of it is that the Pharisees come down from Jerusalem some 50 miles to ask Jesus a question. And in Matthew 15, the question that they come some 50 miles to ask Jesus is this. They ask, why do your disciples wash their hands? Now, if you're going to travel some 50 miles to talk to the very Son of God, Son of Man, why would you ask that question? Why would you ask Jesus, why do your disciples wash their hands? Why couldn't they just have sent him a text message, or an email? But how do you think Jesus would respond? Would he say, hold on? Would he say, okay, I got it? But anyway, they come 50 miles to ask Jesus a question. And Jesus responds to them. He says, why do you break the tradition, or why do you break the commandments for the traditions of your fathers? So their seemingly small question was responded in a very big question that Jesus asked them. Why do you break the commandments of God to obey the traditions of men, the traditions of your fathers? And so we look back and here we say, is Paul primarily just zealous for the traditions, or is he zealous for God? Timothy George says, the point to be made in this discussion is that Paul's persecuting activity, carried out with great energy and dispatch, arose sincere religious conviction and high moral expectations. So Paul was seeking to be, a teacher's pet, or the poster child for obedience, to obey in every degree. But he was obeying the traditions of his fathers, and not particularly that of God. Verses 15 through 16, we see God's purpose for Paul through the gospel. 15 reads, "But when God, who from my birth set me apart and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son in me." We'll stop there. I love the "but when" verses in Scriptures. I love that change in dynamic, that when man or woman in Scripture are so focused on something, maybe we might say doing what was right in their own eyes. That mentality. When somebody thinks, I got this all right, and I'm doing it this way, I'm doing it my way. And then we see the "but when." But when God was pleased to do something. And it demonstrates this radical change, this paradigm shift of what somebody was purposing to do, what they thought was good. And God says, no, this is what you're going to do. This is my plan. This is my purpose for you. And Paul had that same experience. It says that Paul was set apart for the gospel. Martin Luther says this about this text. He says, it's one thing, therefore, to know the law and have excelled it in righteousness, but it's another thing to know the Son of God. Timothy George on this passage too says, Paul's first proof for the non-human origin of the gospel then was a quick review of pre-Christian past. His life before Christ was given over to utter hostility and opposition to the very gospel he had now proclaimed. Only a radical transformation brought about a supernatural intervention could account for this change in him. So we see that Paul is changed in verse 15 through 16 by an extreme act of God, and it qualifies God's work. It says, who set him apart from his mother's womb, or from birth. And the point of the text is getting to that called. But when God called Paul out of his grace to reveal it in Jesus Christ. And so we see two things here. That Paul is not just set apart, but at the right time, when it pleased God, he was called by grace for the purpose of revealing his Son in or to Paul. That Jesus Christ was revealed in Paul, so that he could then reveal it to the church at Galatia. Verses 16 through 23 kind of talk about Paul's where he remained steadfast to his purpose by the gospel. And it says that Paul didn't go right up to Jerusalem before the apostles, but where did he go instead? Paul says he went to Arabia, right? Now, most commentators, most scholars, they think that he went there for two reasons. The first could be a spiritual reason, where Paul goes to be with the Lord on a spiritual retreat, to know the one in whom he's serving, and to continue in allowing Christ to reveal himself to him. One of the points of this is that in Arabia is Mount Sinai, and so Paul could have gone there just as the Israelites went to Mount Sinai to receive the law and to kind of establish their faith in the Lord. And so that's a possibility. It's also possible that Paul could have went to Arabia for teaching and for bringing the gospel and delivering it to them. We're just not sure. But either way, Paul went to Arabia and was gone for some time, even before he thought of going to Jerusalem. But even when Paul goes to Jerusalem, so now he separated himself so that the gospel can be entirely of God and not kind of distributed to him by man, i.e. the apostles or any other source. But Paul is saying, I received the source from God. But what is the result of that? The result we find in the end of verses 23 and 24. It says they kept hearing, "He who formerly persecuted us now preaches the faith which he once tried to destroy." The response of those of the apostles and those of Judea said, "And they glorified God because of me." That was their response. They glorified God because of me. So it's a divine design that Paul stayed away from Jerusalem, and that he wasn't in connection with the apostles, because that would allow the fermentation of the gospel within him to be rooted in the Father, to be rooted in Jesus Christ alone, and not to be affirmed or received or distributed by even the other apostles. Timothy George, in summarizing the passage, gives us a few notes about what the gospel is here in Galatians. He says the gospel is apocalyptic revelation revealed by God himself. He says the gospel is a dynamic force in human history. The gospel of Jesus revealed through Paul, while truly a new unveiling was not invented out of thin air. And finally says the gospel Paul proclaimed was universal in scope, not restricted to any one class, nationality, race, gender, or social grouping. You see, Paul takes these verses, 11 through 24, to demonstrate that the gospel is not his alone. That the gospel is not merely made of man, but the source of that gospel is Jesus Christ. And the source of that gospel is the triune God who orchestrated and performed it and completed it. And so Paul can rest in the fact that there is not a man-made source to which the gospel comes from. For you and I today, if we could just encapsulate this, or to encompass this one statement, this text into one idea, I'd say it would be this: that you and I are messengers of a message that has a divine source. You and I are messengers of a message that has a divine source or a divine author.
Say it again.
You and I are messengers, are we not? We're ones carrying a message. And that message has a divine author, has a divine source by which it comes from. I'll say it in other ways. Because God is the author of the gospel, you and I can rest and rely on the truthfulness of the gospel that God has demonstrated and granted to us. Because the gospel is not from God. The gospel is from God, not man. We can rely on its truthfulness and adequacy. Since the gospel is from God and not tainted by man, we can rest in its simplicity but absorb its truthfulness. To illustrate this, in other spheres, not only are we messengers carrying a message, but think about it in terms of this way, that God is the conductor of an orchestra. What is our role in that orchestra? Well, you and I are the musicians, and we are playing His tune. God is a conductor. We are merely musicians playing His tune. In another realm of life, how about God is the architect? God is the architect, and you and I are builders, building a house, right? And we might refer to the blueprints, but in reality, those blueprints are governed by the architect. And so when we're building, we have a problem. Yes, we turn to the blueprints, but in order to build something exactly as planned, it's best to know the architect who wrote the blueprints. So yes, we are messengers with a message, the gospel. But that message has a divine source, a divine author. So the question we have to ask ourselves, do we run the risk of misinterpreting that message that we're carrying? While today we sit back and we say, no, we're not particularly in Paul's shoes. We run into the same predicament as Paul. Today we are bombarded with so many methods of how to communicate, right? As we talked about before, there's the miscommunication, misinterpreting of text messages. Think about all the ways in which we communicate any message in life today, whether it be verbally or non-verbally. There are so many ways to communicate. Growing up and thinking about the methods that we had to share the gospel with others, I thought about some, like the Romans Road, or the 4 spiritual laws, or we had a little booklet that we used to share, or tracts, handing out Gospel of John or New Testaments, and those are all methods to share a message. I think about today, if I want to share a message with somebody, I could put it on Facebook, I could put it on Skype, I could email it to somebody, I could text message, or I could say it to them in person. But at the end of the day, I have to remind myself and ask myself, what message am I sending? What message am I sending? And I've convinced myself that while I am sending a message, I have to say, is this message that I'm sending the message that I'm living? Is the message that we're sending the message that we're living? I.e., is the message of the gospel that's being proclaimed, that we proclaimed in any verbal or non-verbal communication, is that the message that we're living? Because the message that we're living, that's going to speak the loudest to the people we interact with, to the people we communicate with. So when we communicate the gospel in any way, shape, or form, we cannot forget the chance to introduce people not only to the message, but to the author of that message. And the way we can do this is that we can rely on the author. You see, yes, we believe in the divine message, do we not? The death, burial, resurrection of Jesus Christ. Absolutely. But we also believe in the divine author of that message, who is God Himself. So today, you and I are carrying a message. We are messengers of a message, so let us not forget the author of that message. As Paul might have well said, the gospel is a divine message because it has a divine author. So let us deepen our relationship with that author so that it clearly presents the message that is lived out of our lives. Is it not? So we want to demonstrate the author and demonstrate to the others the message and the powerful message of the gospel because on the basis that we have a relationship with its divine author. You and I are carrying a message. Who is that message from? Let's pray. Triune God, we humble ourselves before you and we submit to you. We know that as we draw near to you, that you will draw near to us. Father, we recognize that we have been given this divine, beautiful message of the gospel, that Christ died for us in our place so that we can have life. But God, that message, the message of Christ, what He has done for us is not void of the author, you, who wants a relationship with us. And as we seek to live out our daily lives, Father, we communicate a message to the people around us, whether we like it or not. And is that message rooted in our relationship with you? So today, may we remember that we are your messengers of the gospel. But may we be drawn closer to you, knowing that message, because you are a God that loves each and every person. May we share that message. God be glorified in our hearts, in our minds, in our actions today. It's all that we do and say. In the name of Jesus Christ, who died for us. Amen.